Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
Thank you for joining me today. Nick Pitts is, of course, going to be hosting over the next couple of hours, and he is our host. But they let me sit in this chair for just a few more minutes because this first hour we thought we might spend some time talking about the debate last night. Because, after all, those of you in the state of Texas probably paid attention to it. Some of you avoided it. Some of you would like to know about it. So, of course, we have Kerby Anderson sitting in Nick's chair for this hour, but then we're going to switch back, and Nick Pitts, of course, is here
Well, I
as
think
well.
everybody knows about the Texas Senate race right now, right? Because the New York Times, there's been like 14 profiles on Beto O'Rourke as of the late. So I think he's more of a national figure than almost a Texas figure, you would say.
As a matter of fact, the last time we talked about this, as a matter of fact, we had Kathy on yesterday just for a moment. Even though I had the national audience, I told people you might want to watch it, because we then had some people that even called in and said, well, there was a debate with Martha McSally in Cinema, and I would like to watch that. And so, well, actually, I find it right now on YouTube, so you can actually watch that one.
Yeah.
I said, for some of you nationally, if you'd like to watch this, nothing else, Ted Cruz is such a great debater. They should sell tickets for that.
Oh, my goodness,
really
yeah.
good.
It's a contact sport when Ted Cruz is involved.
But let me, again, introduce somebody who doesn't need a lot of introduction to our local station, and that is Kathy Ward, who, of course, is the co-host of JP, Kathy, and the Crew. You've been on a number of times, and I've always promised that after we thought we were going to have 3 debates, but we had 2. But after we have a debate, we would have you come on and talk about this. If you're not familiar, an individual that, of course, was the chairwoman or chairperson, however
Chairman,
you want
blah. No Me Too stuff
Collin
here.
County
It's all
Republican
good.
Party, as well as county commissioner, of course, a talk show host, and an individual really politically involved. And I just knew you were going to have a few things to comment about in terms of that debate. But again, coming into this debate, let's assume that the polls are correct. I say this every day. The only poll that really matters happens on November 6th. But, okay, the polls suggest that Ted Cruz is ahead. So I noticed that, if nothing else, it seemed that there was a little difference in the personality of Representative O'Rourke. Did you notice that?
Very much so. First of all, Kerby, thank you so much for letting me be on the show again. I just love hanging out with y'all. And Nick, how cool is he? I love this guy.
I'm
I
a
love this
millennial.
guy.
I'm just
This
going to
is
be taking
awesome.
selfies over here in the corner. Don't mind me.
I love it. I love it. I really saw an edge that did not come across the way I think they intended it to for Beto last night. He's the come in on your skateboard dude, the air guitar in your car dude. And he came off as aggressive and almost hostile.
Right out of
and
the
ironically,
shot,
it really was
First
right
comments,
away.
yeah.
And he at one point talked about civility, and I was like, oh my gosh, eye roll. I was like, well, he's talking about civility, and he's been nothing but rude. I think somebody coached him to be somebody he wasn't last night, and it didn't translate. He was sweating. He didn't look comfortable in his own skin. And then in comparison, you've got Senator Cruz, who, of course, is always the same person. Nick and I were talking before the show. He's not concerned with being the homecoming king or most popular. He's concerned with sticking to the Constitution and representing we the people. And that came across. 2 very different people last night.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the interesting things from last night is I don't know who was in Representative O'Rourke's ear, but it was obvious that something had changed. And it's what we know has changed from our side. We don't know. We're not privy to their information, obviously.
Right.
But what we know has changed is the poll numbers have changed. There's been an increase in CASM where many undecided voters are starting to swing towards Senator Cruz. You've got Beto that's kind of hanging out there around 44 to 46%, which, again, if I'm a Democrat, Democratic national or a Texas official, I'm encouraged by, because that's still more of the populace that is voted for Wendy Davis, for another galvanizing figure. It's up 2 to 3 points. But at the end of the day, that's moral victories aren't victories.
Right.
They're great to think about at night, but they're not really good to think about for the next 6 years when Senator Cruz appears as though he's going to be reelected.
Exactly.
It seems to me that, first of all, what we normally hear from Representative O'Rourke is whenever there's a question, he tells us a story. Mm-hmm. And again, I've seen Republicans and Democrats do it. Now, sometimes they do it because the people counseling them and advising them say, you've got to be relating to the people. Okay, and certainly let's recognize that Jesus told stories in parables. So I understand that. But there is a sense in which
Jesus wasn't running for office. He was running to save our souls.
I want to know the specifics. Tell me how many people go to bed tonight without a meal. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me about one child you met in El Paso or in Tarrant County who went to bed without a meal. And it seems to me that that has been the tendency so far for Representative O'Rourke. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it's interesting, and I'm going to lead right with my blinded squirrel story from last night. And we talked about this the last time after the last debate between Cruz and Beto. Instead of answering the questions, especially instead of when Senator Cruz is like, well, here's how Beto has voted as a congressman, here's what he's done, here's what he stands for, and he's getting the facts out there, the truth. Then you've got Beto who's avoiding those votes with these emotional pull stories, these sad stories, and each story gets sadder, and this is more sad than the last story. So last night they were both asked, what's something that made you happy over the last year that wasn't politics? Well, obviously, they're both dads. And, I believe they both are great dads, love their kids. So Senator Cruz talked about his kids. Beto talked about his. And then instead of just stopping with some kid stories, he talked about how he and one of his kids nursed a blinded squirrel back to health. And I was like, oh, that is it. I threw my hands up in the air. My husband just started laughing because he knew I was going to be like, oh, hashtag that, millennial. And I'm
blinded by the squirrel.
Yeah, good, that's excellent. So, first of all, my son's like, what about rabies? And then how did they know the squirrel was blind? And again, it's just that emotional, progressive, far left pull trying to just, now I'm going to suck in the animal activists because we nursed a squirrel back to health. Well, you know what? I just want to know why you continuously vote in favor of late-term abortion. Why are you against police officers? You didn't vote in favor of body armor. So, again, he couldn't hide from the specifics, even with the blinded squirrel story.
But I think that's just like reality that we're living in today. Like we judge these things based. They're entertainment. They're not informative, and so we know where these individuals stand. The vast majority of the populace has already made up their decision by Labor Day.
Yes.
And so I think there's that part of it though, that there's that 8%, 6 to 8% that individuals are vying for. And in this world today, stories are so pervasive. Everything from our Instagram and Facebook stories to even how these things called commercials. I haven't seen a commercial in forever. I assume that they're still around. Netflix hasn't shown a commercial in forever, so nevertheless. But it's just like they're moving towards,
or what?
Yes.
They're moving towards like
television.
Commercial. What is that?
Phone you're supposed to use.
Well, you fast forward through
Is that
everything.
the thing you just call people on? I usually just text people on it, but nevertheless. But I mean, I think you just see that bent of moving towards the story. But he's just playing to his strength. Ted Cruz's strength is facts, figures, constantly. Like, just give me the raw data. Rational. Beto has always been more of that emotive appeal, and thus far, it's got him to achieve a higher level than what any other Democrat in the past 20 years has gotten in statewide elected office. Well, but it doesn't appear as though it's going to be enough to be able to actually win a race.
Yeah. And again, I want to sort of loosen Ted Cruz up a little bit and tell some stories. The loosest he's ever been is shooting basketballs with Jimmy Kimmel, I guess.
Yes.
And Beto, I know he's loose. He was on the skateboard, and sometimes I want to just give me some facts here. But we'll come back and talk about some of those because we talked about immigration. We talked about the issue of abortion. We certainly talked about climate change came up.
Yeah.
So we have lots to cover. We will do that with Kathy Ward and Nick Pitts right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The new book by David Green has the arresting title, Giving It All Away. He is the founder of Hobby Lobby and tells the story of his success and calls for Christians to give generously to churches and other ministries. He was on my radio program last week, and we talked about Hobby Lobby, the Museum of the Bible, and the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Green family has been at the center of all this and much more. Most people know that Hobby Lobby is closed on Sunday. They may not also realize that their stores close earlier than other stores. That means they're only open 66 hours a week and compete with stores open many more hours. David Green did this so that his employees can spend more time with their families. Hobby Lobby also pays its full-time employees well. Back in 2009, they raised their base pay to $10 an hour. The next year, they tacked on $1. The next year, they did it again and then again. This is another way that the Green family values their employees. I asked David Green if he ever imagined that he would have to sue the federal government. The thought never crossed his mind, but they did so when the HHS mandate would have required them to provide abortifacients for their employees. The fines alone would have cost him $1.3 million per day. Much of his book focuses on giving and challenges Christians to engage in the adventure of tithing. He has 3 principles they use and encourages all of us to implement them as well. First, set your criteria. What are you going to fund? What are your priorities? Second, set your giving amount. Give the first fruits, not what is left over. And finally, set fire for the future. He also has thought quite a bit about how to make generosity generational. His book is certain to spark your interest and encourage you in giving. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Once again, and we have in studio with us Kathy Ward and Nick Pitts. Of course, you are very familiar with the fact that Nick normally is sitting in this chair, and next hour we're going to switch it out. But I thought since we had the debate, this way I will ask the questions or toss it up and let 2 very articulate individuals from 2 different perspectives slightly in terms of age and some things like that, give us a little bit of an evaluation of what was taking place.
Kirby.
Oh, I'm still the oldest one around the table. I live by
Age
that.
is a state of mind.
I feel good about that. It certainly is. Let's take an easy one first, and that is there are certainly reasons why people would not want to talk about the issue of abortion, pro-life issues, women's reproductive health. But that was one of those issues that did come up in the debate. Let's go around the round table again. Ladies first, any thoughts about what you heard in terms of the comments?
Well, and here's again, one of the places where Beto could not run and hide. You cannot get around the fact that he is a supporter. I mean, abortion's barbaric.
Mm-hmm.
Late-term abortion, that's absolutely inexcusable. It's inhumane. It's disgusting. And it's not a Texas value.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how Texans think. That's how Beto thinks. But he's part of that far left, progressive, socialist movement. And it shows in everything. And again, and I'd like to take the time, since we're talking about the women's issue, at one point they were asking about the Me Too movement.
Oh, that's another one I wanted to get to. So go to it now.
Okay. Yeah. And here's the thing, because again, 2 very different men on that stage. You have Beto, who continues, and I take great offense to this, and it takes a lot to offend me. I'm in radio. It takes a lot to offend me. I'm in politics. It takes a lot to offend me. But continuously, I feel like with Beto, that I have to play the victim role. And women are victims, and oh, women this, and oh, poor us, and oh, poor put upon me. And then you've got Senator Cruz, who puts his mom up on a pedestal and talks about her being a high-level executive back in the 50s. So again, we've got such a big difference there, and that tells you everything, and that tells me everything as a woman that I need to know about these two men and how they view women. One thinks we're victims, and the other one wants to celebrate us.
Yeah, I think and here's where I find myself, and you can disagree with me. I think this is where I feel the weight of it, especially when it comes. We'll go with abortion first, and then the Me Too. It's just unconscionable that we're with peers of North Korea right now when it comes to late term abortion.
Right.
That just makes no sense to me that the leader of the free world, the greatest country that the world has ever seen, still allows this just blatant murder and chopping up.
Right.
And it's just gross. It's sickening, and it's very clear that Beto O'Rourke, Congressman O'Rourke, is on one side, and that he's just voting against that kind of thing,
right.
Those bans. And so I'm with him on that, or I'm not with him on that,
right.
but I completely disagree with him on that. But when it comes to the Me Too movement, I think one of the things that I'm feeling my alien nature from a Christian perspective on is that the research is very clear. It seems as though that 1 in 6 women have been the victim or have had sexual abuse. So they've been subject to sexual abuse. Now, I think the victim mentality can sometimes come in by living into it, but I think there have been instances, and it's been very pervasive in the work culture, whereby women have been wronged. And I think that they deserve a redress of those wrongs. Now, to continue to live into that victim mentality,
right.
I think is a totally different mentality, totally different perspective. But I do think that we need to recognize that there has been good parts to the Me Too movement from my perspective, in the sense that women have had the power to be able to speak up for the wrongs that have been committed against them rightly.
Absolutely. And
okay.
Senator Cruz, I mean, it did a very good job of saying almost verbatim what you said. There have been good things that have come out of that movement. But to continue to victimize women...
and that's where,
what are we teaching the next generation of young ladies?
Exactly, and there's been great research that have been done on this. They talked about it's out of the University of Iowa. It talks about during the 18th century there was individuals that lived in an honor culture. Then we transitioned to a dignity culture, and now we're living in a victim culture. So in a dignity culture, individuals appealed to the person, like my handshake, for example, to be able to achieve power. In an honor culture, they achieved to the systems and structures in place. Hence the reason why Abraham Lincoln would appeal to these truths that appear self-evident to all men. And then in a victim culture, individuals are appealing to how the system has wronged them, how people have wronged them in order to achieve power. And so I think you're seeing this whole victim mentality that's playing out, not just in the Me Too movement, but also in marijuana legalization from a recreational perspective, which just is legalized in Canada.
You're right.
Then you've got everything from the transgender movement. Then you've got everything from LGBTQI, ABCDE movement that's happening right now. So I do think that there's a victim mentality that's detrimental, but I don't want to take away any air from the fact that there have been women that have been wronged, and I think it's a positive good right now that they've been empowered through a portion of this Me Too movement to be able to speak out and say, in America, this is not right. In the world, this is not right. So,
and I wonder if there was a possible follow-up question from a individual asking the questions about, well, what can the Senate do about that? It seems like a legitimate question, because on one hand, yes, it's the bully pulpit. Are there any things we can do? And that might have got you into, well, have we provided due process to those on campus? Because that's been one that's kind of very interesting that the Secretary of Education's changed.
And this is where I'm always reminded of the axiom, beware of the man that has a hammer, for everything looks like a nail. Yeah. And that kind of moves into the thing is politics the best solution to this Me Too problem? And I would submit that this is more of a cultural problem than a political problem. And this is culturally needs to work its way out through intermediary institutions, through businesses, creating more hospitable and more equitable environments whereby women don't walk into a place and feel as though they're being preyed upon. Or I just don't think it's a political issue as much as it's a cultural issue.
Yeah, and again, that's my favorite article here.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is, Politics Can't Solve Our Political Problems by our good friend. And Sass. Matter of fact, we're going to see if we can get him on for his new book. And if I'm on, I think you want to be a co-host on that day, right?
Or I'll be peering through that window, tapping him like, let me in.
But again, it is amazing to me, before we move on, that a sitting U.S. senator says we're not going to solve these problems in Washington, D.C. I mean, we as Christians around the table understand that Washington does not hold the answers to all sorts of problems, especially the emotional, spiritual problems of America. But it is at least heartening to have a U.S. sitting senator say these problems are not going to be solved in Washington,
I think
D.C.
that's at the very core, and I know I'm talking too much. I think that's at the very core of the conservative ideology, right? Like we're wanting to be a limited government in order to make space for the more permanent things of life. And so we want to make room for those intermediate institutions, those little platoons that Edmund Burke talks about. We want to make room for the family to be able to raise children, to be productive citizens that are beneficial to the world. We don't need government to interfere on this because we believe there are other avenues whereby citizens are created and not just simply consumers.
Yeah, very good.
Good point.
I got to bring up the word immigration, and again, we see some real differences.
Was that discussed last night? Let me think. Let me go to my notes.
Kathy, go for it.
Well, and again, and I'm going to bring this immigration through the caveat of voter security and ballot security. And Beto starts talking about ballot security and how important all of this is. When we don't have control of our borders, how do you expect us to have control of the ballot box? And as a former county chairman, I've sat on I've been on the ballot board. I've literally been one of those people who's overseen, tons, thousands of votes go through and make sure, there's voter integrity. If we don't know who is in our state and who is in our country, how can you even begin to talk about ballot security and voter fraud? And again, I found that and that was right out of the chute. I was like, how hypocritical. Because if we can't even have an intelligent conversation around legal immigration, and again, we're talking about legal immigration. My goodness, Senator Cruz's father is an immigrant. Yeah. And they always forget that. I'm like, where's the media? Why aren't they covering that? If Ted Cruz were a Democrat, we'd see Raphael everywhere. So that again, it's the hypocrisy of the left when they're trying to talk about one thing when we've got a huge problem over here that's only fueling the fire.
Yeah,
there.
I think it's very problematic simply because some of even our initial estimates of the illegal immigration population are it looked to be minuscule according to a new MIT Yale study. It might not just be 11 million. It could be upwards of 22 million, 16 to 22 million.
That's so scary.
And the reason why there's a scary component, one, because of the security issue.
Yes.
And the second reason, which hits everybody, is that it's been very clearly shown, according to research, that where there is the rule of law is heeded, economic prosperity abounds. And when that's a key engine that affects so many different areas of the American experiment. And so I just think it's very important for us to settle this immigration issue. And a large part of it resides in the Senate.
Yeah,
yes.
My commentary yesterday talked about those 6, if you will, killer apps that lead to success, and one of those is the rule of law.
Yeah.
I might just mention that some of you are leaving some comments on Facebook, one saying that a lot of people have ignored Beto's comments about women in college newspaper. He did apologize for that. But I like this one. Looking to government to solve a cultural problem is wrong. So if you want to leave some of your comments, we'll take those too, and we'll be back with more right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today. In studio with us today, Kathy Ward, and of course, Dr. Nick Pitts, who will be sitting in this chair in about a half an hour, but we wanted to still focus some time and attention on this particular debate. Nick, one of the things we say, that goes back to the old phrase in the scriptures that, you listen to one man and he seems reasonable until you hear the other. And there is a sense when, if all you see are these ads, you really don't know what the issues are, but in these point-counterpoint kind of debates and discussions, you learn a little bit more. And this issue of immigration was certainly one that was controversial last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think if you're looking from both sides' perspective, I think there's a sense that one person wants to build higher and higher walls, and then another person wants to tear down all existing walls and let everybody come in. And I think there's new research out that indicates that about 86% of Americans don't fall in either category. Right. That we very much are not galvanized by both sides. And from a millennial perspective, the immigration issue is hit pretty closely with them, just because primarily they're more relational people. That's kind of how they view the world, through a story perspective and through a relational perspective. And so you have many millennials that are growing up among many undocumented immigrants that are just making their way here through Dreamers program, which is about 800,000 people, to just a variety of different instances. And what I think is fascinating, especially from a Christian perspective, is there is a sense that we need to take care. I think it's very clear in the biblical narrative that there is borders that are put into place in order to secure the people, right, as well as to secure the family, to restrain the evil and enact justice. I think that's good. I think that's profitable. I think that's very helpful. And especially for Texas listeners, it'd be very interesting. I'd highly encourage you to look at Will Hurd and some of his legislation that he's put forward relative to a smart wall. I think it's phenomenal, some of the technology that he's tapped into just from his previous background in the private sector. But I do think, especially from a Christian perspective, there is the compassionate heart. Now, I think sometimes that compassionate heart can sometimes, for some listeners, would say, well, Nick's just saying everybody gets in. Well, no, but I do want us to honor our past and to recognize that we are a nation of immigrants, not a nation of illegal immigrants, but we're a nation of immigrants. And there's been the numbers are very clear relative to economic output that immigrants put out. That it's lower crime rates. They're contributing relative to Social Security. They're contributing relative to economic output. Texas is the number 2 that would lose over the next 10 years from worker output next to California if you were to ship everybody out. And so I do think that we do need to listen to that, but I refuse to fall into either camp that says we just need to continue to build bigger and bigger walls and not let anybody in, or to the camp that says we just need to eradicate all the walls and let everybody in. I think that's wrong on both ends.
Let me pick up on that for just a minute, because I was reading something in a thing called the Daily Briefing, in which they were saying that the two extremes get all the attention, and they're both white and rich, which was so the very, very liberal rich whites and the very, very conservative rich conservatives. And the mass of America is in the middle. And you've seen me use this illustration before. It's kind of, one shoots this missile over, boom, and then the other shoots a missile over, boom. And everybody else is just kind of watching that. And I think the immigration debate is a good example of that, where most Americans say, I don't necessarily agree with either of these extreme positions. The extreme position says let everybody in, or we're not going to let any of those foreigners in. And it seems to me that even in these campaigns, many of these candidates are missing the middle. What's your thought?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to that. It goes back to that 86%. So you're referencing the new study that was put out that was highlighted by David Brooks and even highlighted this morning in Axios, that indicated that said that 7% on each side, just these very, very radical ends of the spectrum, have dominated the conversation. That say we need to build higher and higher walls and not let anybody in, which is not good. And then just eradicate all walls and let everybody in, which is not good. It's not good. And so there's a sizable contingent of us that are saying, well, yes, we want to let people in because that's just who we are. But we don't want to let everybody in because that's not who we are.
We
and
want
we see
a wall
the value,
with the door.
We see there's value. There's value in the immigration population. There's an energy that's a part of that. There's just a hardiness to be able to make much of the American dream that not only does the immigrant prosper because of that, but it also spurs creativity and a hearty work ethic among other individuals as well. But we have to do it in an orderly manner. And this is where the Senate has got to get its act together. Like, just at the end of the day, the Me Too legislation might not be the thing that they need to pay attention to, because they're this august body they've been given these comfort zones of 6-year terms in order to debate these robust issues, to be able to look and give us a vision of what 10 years, 20 years, 30 years the U.S. could be.
Yeah, very good point. And again, just going to the daily briefing, which is on our website, and you like David Brooks a lot, right?
Yeah,
that was a good column.
Yeah,
So
I don't agree with him. I agree with him about 80% of the time.
Oh, sure.
But I think he was right on with this, and I'm just so disheartened by. And this is probably where my bleeding, compassionate conservative heart is going to come out, just because I personally know, and the data is just so clear on what the when we have an orderly immigration process, when we allow immigrants to be able to we provide clear pathways for illegal immigrants to become legal immigrants. They go through the pathway. I think it's so beneficial for the American experiment, and it just makes us a better country, not only because we honor our past, but we create a better future, and we've got to do better on this.
Well, and Kirby, what Nick's saying, it so clearly draws the distinction that is missed out there. Conservatives can be compassionate.
Yeah.
And when somebody comes at me and they're like, well, oh, you're a Republican, so you're against immigration. No. And I told them about how my great grandmother Peregrina came over from Czechoslovakia, and thank the good Lord she did, at such a very young age, and ended up owning 3 businesses of her own. So that's where, for some reason, your message, that needs to get out to people of your age, your demographics. And the liberal media is so against letting somebody like Nick speak, and he does it so eloquently, and he shows that, yes, you can be conservative, you can be for the rule of law, but you can also be kind and have a big heart.
I think because there's so much benefit to it. I think it can, one, you can tell it in a story format, and then 2, you can use the data. I think some of the greatest research that's coming, I don't want to say the greatest research, I think some of the most palatable research and work that's coming out right now is not choosing one side of the other. The Beto O'Rourke, where you're just telling stories, or even the Ted Cruz, where you're just giving figures. It's beautifully melding those two together. I mean, you think about Hillbilly Elegy and J.D. Vance, how he beautifully melded those together. You think about Matt Lewis and Too Big to Fail, what he was talking about. There's so many individuals, especially on the conservative side, that are really getting captivated by this vision. And I'll just give a plug, a Will Hurd right now, for individuals that are in San Antonio right now. If you just happen to be listening on Facebook land, he's in a fight right now, and he's got a great policy. He's got a great legislation out about a smart wall. That one, it costs about $500,000 for every mile of wall, whereas a physical wall is about $46 million, and the maintenance fees and the tracking. It's phenomenal. And so,
well, if nothing else, he had a target on his back, but I noticed now Democrats have pulled out against Congressman Hurd, and they seem to be focusing on Congressman Sessions. They're spending that money on Sessions that they weren't spending on Hurd. But just since we're coming to a break, let's talk about one other aspect since we're talking about immigrants. If you actually come here and you are naturalized, that means you pass the citizenship test. Now, there is something that I wrote a commentary on that comes out next week that finds out that most Americans cannot pass the U.S. citizenship test. And since this is the Millennial Roundtable, they found those under the age of 45, only 19% of those under the age of 45.
Well, look at what we've done to public education.
Well, and to pass the citizenship test, you only have to get 60 questions out of 100 right.
I thought 70. Well, okay, back in the 90s when I taught school, my gosh, I mean, back in the 90s when he wasn't even born. And by the way, Christy just said, she was so glad to hear a millennial speaking the truth and speaking like Nick is. So that's so fantastic. She's posted on Facebook.
But you taught school. Here's what I suggested.
70% was.
Now it's 60%. Now it's 60%, according to
what?
And even more point, there are certain states now that are actually suggesting, and this is my recommendation, that in order to graduate from high school, you have to pass the citizenship test. Because why is it that you can't get 1 in 5 of the millennials or the iGen generation to pass a test when they theoretically have just studied it in school? So either they weren't listening in school or they weren't being taught in school. And the quickest thing to turn that around, as you well know, is if you were to require that people that are born here know as much about our government and history as people who were naturalized citizens.
Oh,
Yes.
you better believe it.
Yes.
We're in a situation now where more naturalized citizens know more about the American history and government than
Right.
people born here. There's
You're
something wrong
right.
with that.
Oh, I completely agree. And so, I think there's a variety of things that I would point to. I mean, you can look at individuals that are it's like 41% now of individuals that aren't born into a kind of a marriage household. And so you have individuals that are born into broken families. You've got we're not reading. Like at the end of the day, millennials
What's
just
that?
aren't reading. We're reading text messages, but we're not
Yeah,
actually
reading tweets,
engaging.
but that's it.
But we're not doing that. But so I think it's going to be increasingly important. And I would highly recommend trying to figure out our history if you want to try to make us move forward.
Don't you wish more millennials knew as much about history
I'm
as Nick
loving
Pitts?
Nick. This is great.
We'll take a break. We got more right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. It's fair to say that the state of Oklahoma takes high school sports pretty seriously. The Oklahoma Secondary School Athletic Association, or OSA, regulates high school sports. Public schools are admitted freely, but private schools must apply for membership. In 1998, Christian Heritage Academy, known widely for its 8-man football team, applied to be a member of OSA, but were denied. They applied again in 1999, but the majority of members rejected them a second time. That was enough for them, and the school filed a lawsuit in 2003 alleging that they had been denied the equal protection of the law and deprived of their First Amendment freedoms. The court concluded that OSA's rules were discriminatory by stating that a majority of members could simply reject religious schools over secular schools for any reason or none at all. The court found there was no legitimate purpose served. OSA members could, the court noted, reject applications for membership for any reason including dislike or distrust. Of course, the court was willing to allow OSA to chart its own membership, but it had to be fair. Creating a system that allowed ample room for members to reject religious schools just because they did not like them was not enough. The court's point is clear. The First Amendment requires precision. When the state acts without precision, rights can be quickly abused. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention next hour we'll be back to our Millennial Roundtable, but I thought I'd put one or
So I'll
two
be out.
more issues. But again, we don't want to wear you out. You started out today with JP, Kathy, and the crew. I hate to think about what time you get up in the morning.
Pretty early.
Pretty
but on days
early.
like this, when I know I get to come in and talk about the debate, spring right out of bed.
You both are up very early. You to get ready for a show, and you to write the daily briefing. You still get up early for that, right?
Oh yeah. It's so much fun. It's so much fun, especially after last night. So I work at DBU primarily for our Institute for Global Engagement. We had an event last night where we had Ambassador Brownback, former governor of Kansas, former senator out of Kansas, has been appointed by President Trump at the beginning of this year to be the ambassador at large for international religious freedom, and just the great work that he and his team are doing around the world. It's just a phenomenal work, highly encouraged. And if you could sum it up, that we have a government that's wanting to fight for individuals to have the opportunity to be able to choose and have the liberty to be able to choose a religion or no religion at all. But some of the testimonies that we were hearing last night, especially out of meetings yesterday, was I would just echo what C.S. Lewis would say, that Aslan is on the move, that God is at work around this world. And when individuals are given the opportunity to choose, they are more often than not drawn to the truth. And the truth.
And again, just think about last night over choice. You could have watched the debate, which we're talking about right now. You could have heard Sam Brownback, who I've gotten to know over the years at Topeka Bible Church. You could have heard John Meacham of Newsweek.
Oh, yeah.
And if you just thought all three of those were not worth listening to, you could hear me speak last night at the Hope Center. So, I just got all these
I would have loved
things.
to have heard you speak.
No, I would have. If I weren't speaking, I would have been at 2 or 3 of these other events. I would have cloned myself and been to at least 2 of those events. John Meacham, that would have been good. I had some friends that went to it last night, so we'll find out. But I want to focus just for another few minutes, and this is going to change the countenance of Kathy Ward. Healthcare, Medicare for all. That came up last night. Go for it.
And that's what it is, Kirby. I mean, this is, I literally, I was taking notes last night, and healthcare, and I'm getting ready to start typing out, and I just put down, Beto is all about socialized medicine, period. And literally, he doesn't have the concept. If you look at socialized medicine and you look at people in other countries who are living with that, they're waiting a year for heart surgery. If my mom or dad or somebody I loved needed heart surgery and I knew they had to wait a year.
And then I have to spend trillions of dollars, right?
Yes. Well, in his plan, mathematically, even if you tax the richest of the rich.
Yeah.
And again, you go back to public education and what the heck is happening, because even the most simple mathematical, this is with extreme taxing. Is that a sport now? I don't know. I think it is. I think it is with the Dems.
Most sides are playing really well. Our deficit's going up high. Thank you.
And even if they were doing some kind of extreme taxing, at most, it paid for he could get the payment for 6 months or something like that. And we're talking, it's not mathematically fathomable to have his plan work. It's just not.
I think it goes back to just, and again, I would say, yes, the Democrats are more actively pushing this, but I think this is endemic of both sides, that we have no long-term vision, that we're myopically stuck in the moment.
Good point.
And I think from a Democratic perspective, they don't realize the long-term benefits that come with allowing marketplace competition into the healthcare market. And then from a Democratic perspective, I think I'll just being very, in the immediacy of a moment, desperate people do desperate things.
Yes.
And when individuals are hurting, I think all of us would dare say that we would spend we would have no limit to our spending if it was to help somebody that we loved.
Absolutely.
But we've got to set up a system whereby we allow that type of marketplace competition to come into the healthcare market. We've got to set up a system where we can kind of get some of this regulation off to allow individuals to be able to have the opportunity to choose, and contra to former President Obama, choose to keep their existing plan, right?
Exactly.
So,
insurance reform. Let's talk. If you want to have a good debate about healthcare in America, let's talk insurance reform.
Goodness, I know if I go to Starbucks right now, my papaw's going to roll over in his grave because I'm going to spend $4.38 on a drink on hot bean water. But I don't know if I go to we'll go to one of the local hospitals right down the road, and I were to get an MRI. I don't know how much I'm spending right now. There's no transparency whatsoever. It has to go through 3 or 4 different intermediaries, and I just don't think that's beneficial for the long-term prospects of the healthcare system.
And again, one of the things I might encourage people to do is Prager University does these great videos.
Yes.
And one of the individuals that we're going to have on real soon is Lan Hee Chi, who is with the Hoover Institute. And he has done very good What's Wrong with Government-Run Healthcare, and he did in a very graphically interesting way, because those are very well done, say some of the things that Nick already said in terms of entrepreneurship, innovation, cost, and all of the rest. But again, this is one that almost seems like it's focus group driven, because most people say, oh, I like Medicare. Well, yeah, but you have only 15% of the population on Medicare. They've paid into it for year after year after year after year. And yet they also sometimes get a supplemental policy because they find out that some of those drugs aren't on the formulary. Some kinds of surgeries aren't available, but most people sort of like it. But, oh, by the way, it's about ready to go broke in about 8 years with the current system. So then we pile all of the population on that. I think last night, didn't Ted Cruz say something like this just doesn't pass fifth grade math or something like that?
Well, I mean, if the previous segment was any indication, I don't think a lot of people pass fifth grade math, right? Like, we can't pass our citizenship test, for goodness sake, right? So I think, I'll continue to harp on this, because I think this is an endemic issue right now. We just have no long-term vision when it comes to immigration, when it comes to healthcare. We're talking about education reform as well in certain segments of the population. We're seeing some great things that are coming out of classical education right now in the private sector. We're seeing some great things coming out of the charter school systems, but yet we continue to see more and more individuals failing to live up to measures inside the classroom of public schools right now. I just think that there needs to be a long-term vision. We need a John F. Kennedy. We need a Ronald Reagan to give us a big picture, and for everyone to be able to chip in order to be able to accomplish.
Absolutely. And I think transparency, which you mentioned, is so key in all of these areas. Think about it. And you're talking about medical bills, and the older you get, trust me, the more those 3 pages turn into 13 real fast. And I feel like I need a medical degree to figure it out, and an accounting degree. Imagine if you went to your bank, and that's the lack of transparency you got from your bank. People would lose their minds. Liberals, conservatives, everybody would be up in arms. But we have to accept it when it comes to our own health.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
Well, we need more regulations. That's how we solve climate change, and that's how we solve healthcare, right?
Climate change.
We ran out of time on all of that, but Kathy just mentioned again where people can hear you on 1160 and what you guys will be talking about over the next couple of days.
Yes, we're JP, Kathy, and the crew, and thank you for allowing me to plug the show. We have a real fun morning show that we hope gives you a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of education, and we're 8 to 9 every morning on 1160 AM KBDT. And tomorrow we'll have a segment. We have a financial planner out of Wall Street who calls every Thursday, and then on Friday it's kind of our fun day, and then Monday we'll actually have some of the Trumpette ladies in studio, and then Tuesday Jim Pickle will be coming in studio, who is of course running for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
And that's become a very controversial
Talk about
race.
A battle
with
for
Moberg and Pickle.
the
That's
conservatives
right.
versus the progressives. That's a key
Which is funny.
race.
I know both of them.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yes. Moberg was at my son-in-law's wedding, and of course Pickle is somebody I've supported, so I know both of them very well, but that's another story. And again, we have the daily briefing, which is on the website there, and also the link to DBU and all the things that you do there in terms of the Institute for Global Engagement. So I'm going to get off of this chair. Nick's going to come in here, and we're going to convene our Millennial Roundtable. Looking forward to it.
Bringing the standard down lower and lower.
No,
that's
I'm
what
going to put this guy in the captain's chair.
I love it.
Yeah. Warp speed ahead. We'll be right back.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
Hey, and welcome back to Point of View. On this second hour, I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable. We've got Kerby Anderson and David, man. David, so great to have you here.
Love to be here.
Oh, so great. So we've had a great first hour. We had Kathy Ward that was in studio with us to talk a little bit about what was happening last night. There was a little debate that happened last night, Kirby.
Yeah, and again, for some of our listeners that aren't in the state of Texas, it was a debate between Representative Robert Francis O'Rourke, is his formal name, but everyone knows him as Beto O'Rourke, and then Senator Ted Cruz. And over the last couple of days, we've had all sorts of people call in and saying, I missed that debate. I had somebody yesterday say, I missed the debate in Arizona. And I keep telling them that there's this thing called YouTube. You've heard of it, right? And you can actually type in that, and almost all of these debates are on YouTube. So for those of you that maybe are saying, well, I'm not in the state of Texas and I can't vote for Ted Cruz, but I bet a lot of our listeners almost voted for Ted Cruz when he was running for president. Yeah. There is a really good interchange that takes place when you have two very qualified individuals. One is a congressman, one is a senator, debating these issues. And I just would recommend that people might want to go see that debate, if nothing else. And it's available on YouTube. And, of course, if you want to hear our commentary about it, simply go to pointofview.net and check on that first hour, and you can watch or listen to the conversation we had.
Yeah, it was a robust conversation. We talked about everything from immigration to what was happening relative to the Me Too movement to healthcare reform, and so it was just it was a very robust conversation, one might be able to say. But now we're moving into the second hour, and we're introducing a new person to the roundtable. We've got David Fraga here. David, how are you, man?
Doing great.
So good, man. So good. So tell us a little bit about your background, man.
Yeah, so basically I'm from East Texas, came to Dallas to play soccer, got recruited to play at Dallas Baptist University. Okay. Played there for 5 years, awesome opportunity there, and eventually just became a captain there for about 3 of those years. Okay. And, decided to do my master's, such a big blessing to get that opportunity, get a scholarship to do that. And now I'm just doing real estate, pointing to people, going into men's ministry, and just loving on people everywhere I go.
That's phenomenal, man. That's phenomenal. What church are you associated with?
Gateway Church.
Okay, that's great. That's so great. And so I'll be interested. Let's continue the conversation a little bit about Ted Cruz and the Beto O'Rourke debate, just because you're a millennial, David. And so help me understand this, because the polls are very clear that Beto O'Rourke has a pretty big, sizable lead on Senator Cruz when it comes to millennial polling. I think the last poll I saw was Quinnipiac that specified it a couple of months back and indicated he was upwards of 16% over Ted Cruz among millennials. So those born between 1980 to some put it at 1998, others put it at 1993. Right. Regardless, it's still the largest voting demographic, whatever. So what would you say is the reason why Beto O'Rourke, Congressman O'Rourke, is appealing to millennials right now?
Millennials are definitely, they want to, so from what I'm seeing, people coming to approach me, I've been getting all these text messages out of nowhere, actually. So it's kind of crazy. Emails, my friends will be telling me, hey, have you looked into the races lately? You should look into Beto. Yeah. And it's kind of like almost a popularity contest right now. And it's a little unfortunate because they honestly don't dive in to see okay, what do they really stand for? And not just that, but they're just like, they want to stay with surface level things. Oh, this guy's going to give me free stuff here. Oh, this guy's just going to he's going to help me. It's going to be beneficial, right? But in reality, is that good for long term? So a lot of the millennials that I see and a lot of my friends, they want the immediate results. So it's kind of like there's the results, but they don't understand that there's a process to get to that. And a lot of that takes years, time,
Mhm.
you know, reforms and all that stuff. And all these promises he's making, you know, are potentially going to change the
There's
whole
like
culture.
an immediate gratification component to what
Yeah,
that, and I think
absolutely.
that's very aware, and to a certain degree, I think many of our listeners can recognize that. There's a sense that, and I mentioned it last segment, Kirby. There's a sense that when you're desperate, you're willing to do desperate things, and with
Right.
millennials right now, the research is very clear that we have not inherited a better position than our parents have. It's been a much rougher go when it comes to the economic situation. It's been very much. We've had much more debt than they have, especially
Right.
from a student loan debt. I mean, the average student loan debt's around $35,000 for someone that's graduating college right now. And so there's a sense that there's an immediacy, like we're gasping for air. And what we're finding in some of these candidates, like specifically if we're looking at Beto, when you're giving out free stuff, I mean, we've all been to a sporting event where we've looked at the Jumbotron and we realize what the links people will go to grab a extra large shirt that won't fit them. They act a fool for that kind of stuff. And so it seems like we're just going to great lengths to be able to grab the extra large shirt that in the end, it probably won't be beneficial for us, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a quick way out. You know?
And so I think that's going to be a thing that's interesting, especially Kirby, when you think about Ted Cruz, and especially from a Republican standpoint, continuing to appeal to a younger generation that really does, like all of us, we enjoy free stuff, but how do you sell them on a message that you're battling against the free stuff? I think is going to be interesting.
Oh, and again, I want to ask both of you that are millennials, what about what we might call the cool factor? Because that is one thing that, again, Beto O'Rourke or Representative O'Rourke actually has, and anybody that's outside of the state of Texas, if you're not familiar, he looks a lot like a Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Tremendous, because you know he's Irish Catholic. Ultimately, although he used the word Beto to sort of sound Hispanic, but he's pretty cool. And we had a previous president, Barack Obama, was a cool president, and that I would wonder, you know, David, is something that might be a factor, because here is an individual that comes skateboarding into a parking lot who has his sleeves rolled up and gestures a great deal and seems like a lot of fun, and he's willing to have everybody take a selfie with him. You know, as an athlete, you know how many people wanted to take a selfie from you and get pictures with you and all that kind of stuff. You can appreciate, whether you're an athlete or a politician, you're kind of a rock star. And whereas Ted Cruz, not the kind of guy you'd probably want to have coffee with. Beto O'Rourke's the kind of guy you'd want to go to a bar with. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, especially, our part of a generation, we love to use social media for everything. We want to show everyone that, hey, this is what we're doing these days, right? Yeah. Not just that, but showing the good side. And so when you're able to take selfies, when you're able to just meet them where they're at, right? People get excited because they're part of a movement. People want to be part of something big, want to be part of something drastic, honestly. And when it's, you know, he's leveraging that, he's using that, and that's a great approach, because that's marketing itself right there. And just being able to meet those millennials where they're at and saying, hey, like, this is not just all I do. I also want to help you get out of, you know, difficult situations, this and that.
Yeah, I think that's a key point that one of the things I've been echoing for a little while now, David. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Is the sense that millennials, and I think we just largely haven't seen it, right? We haven't seen a leader give us a captivating vision. Right. I think that's why millennials that are geared towards the church, from their vantage point, that there's something magical about falling underneath the idea of wanting to extend a kingdom and being a part of a great cloud of witnesses and moving forward and making His kingdom come, His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Whereas from a political perspective, we want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to tear down a Berlin Wall. We want to go send a man to the moon. We need another grand vision. And I think millennials gravitate towards that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And so we've got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking a little bit more about we'll say the race for the Senate right now between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. But we'll also start talking a little bit about millennials in the church. I'll be really interested on David's thoughts, especially from his perspective as a businessman that's really interested in expanding the kingdom. So we'll talk about that and a little bit more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The new book by David Green has the arresting title, Giving It All Away. He is the founder of Hobby Lobby and tells the story of his success and calls for Christians to give generously to churches and other ministries. He was on my radio program last week, and we talked about Hobby Lobby, the Museum of the Bible, and the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Green family has been at the center of all this and much more. Most people know that Hobby Lobby is closed on Sunday. They may not also realize that their stores close earlier than other stores. That means they're only open 66 hours a week and compete with stores open many more hours. David Green did this so that his employees can spend more time with their families. Hobby Lobby also pays its full-time employees well. Back in 2009, they raised their base pay to $10 an hour. The next year, they tacked on $1. The next year, they did it again and then again. This is another way that the Green family values their employees. I asked David Green if he ever imagined that he would have to sue the federal government. The thought never crossed his mind, but they did so when the HHS mandate would have required them to provide abortifacients for their employees. The fines alone would have cost him $1.3 million per day. Much of his book focuses on giving and challenges Christians to engage in the adventure of tithing. He has 3 principles they use and encourages all of us to implement them as well. First, set your criteria. What are you going to fund? What are your priorities? Second, set your giving amount. Give the first fruits, not what is left over. And finally, set fire for the future. He also has thought quite a bit about how to make generosity generational. His book is certain to spark your interest and encourage you in giving. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and joined at the Millennial Roundtable, we got David and then Kerby as well joining us. We've been talking a little bit about the debate that happened last night, and it's just very fascinating because you have just an individual that has captivated younger audiences, has really captivated the country to a large degree outside of Texas, I guess would be the correct component when you have Beto O'Rourke, Congressman O'Rourke. It's been very interesting to see his campaign that has just generated so much frenzy and excitement. Individual that's skateboarding onto stage. He's hosting campaign events where he's running, and he's running with all these individuals. And it's just been a very uncanny, unprecedented kind of race that he's run. But you know what's so fascinating, Kerby? And so we talk about this, that we're hearing so much about Beto O'Rourke from a Democrat, but someone that's just is younger by 8 years and is just as captivating and is achieving success as a guy named Josh Hawley.
Josh Hawley,
at Attorney
Missouri.
General, is running for Senate right now. Mm-hmm. He's 8 years younger than him. He's winning right now, but it just so happens he happens to be a Republican. And so I think that's very befuddling, I guess you could say.
Well, and you do have some of these shticks. Another one I could mention is Arizona. Martha McSally talks about the fact that she's flying and as the first woman pilot and all those kinds of things. So there are some that are being identified in a way that gives them some identity, whereas you have other individuals running from the military. It doesn't seem to be working so well, for example, in Michigan. So, but the point that I think we're making is that if you're going to attract this large voting block of millennials, it probably is going to have to be more than just some facts and figures. Yeah. And let's just use the two examples. Most of our listeners, even if they don't live in the state of Texas, know who Ted Cruz is because he ran for the presidency. So they have a pretty good idea that this is a guy that when you ask him a question, he's going to give you lots of facts and figures. If you ask him what time it is, he's going to tell you how to build a watch. And after a while, you go, okay. I love his stands, but he's maybe I want to loosen him up just a little bit. Okay, and I say that as a person that really appreciates his family. So I'm not meaning this in a negative way, but that's the way he is.
Yeah.
Each one of us are different. Then you see Beto O'Rourke, which many of our listeners maybe don't know, but just think of more of the casual kind of just everybody's friend kind of guy, and sometimes you want him to give you a few more facts. Don't every time we ask you a question tell me another story about some difficult situation. But to, again, make a difference, I think, to the millennial vote, you have to have enough content, like Ted Cruz, so that they know you're not just inauthentic, and you don't know what you're talking about. But you darn well better have some personality, like a Beto O'Rourke or somebody like that, or they're going to go, I'm not even sure I'm going to vote. And the problem for you millennials, not you in particular, but a lot of them, is you have more millennials that have signed up for Facebook than have signed up to vote in the next election, right?
It's fascinating, just the currency that social media has in today's market. And so, Dave, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this, because we just have so many individuals. I think it's 90 to 91% of individuals that have Facebook.
Right.
And from a millennial perspective, you'd say Facebook's old. Why is anybody on Facebook, right? That's like the phone book. It's just for reference
like
purposes.
8-track.
It's just for reference purposes. I need Instagram, I need Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera. But so you have more people that are signed up for a Facebook account than are actually signed up to vote right now. It could be lower. And again, we've seen such a huge increase in the number of people that have registered to vote. One might say because of Taylor Swift, but nevertheless, that's a whole different
another one here.
Yeah.
Look at how Taylor Swift has changed the Tennessee race, for example.
Yeah, wow. And so to say that there's just a sense that individuals from a millennial perspective are looking for that personality, but also it seems as though they're very apathetic right now towards the political process. And I'd be really interested to hear your perspective on this, David. Why are millennials, even though they're the largest voting bloc, it seems to be, according to the research, that they're very apathetic and just not getting out to vote?
Just because that's something that most people aren't being proactive about. And so if it's something that's kind of remotely difficult to do, most of us just don't want to do that. But now I'm starting to see even the Snapchat, like, hey, you can sign up and go into this location, or on Twitter as well. And in reality, when it's starting to get a little bit easier through social media, I mean, why not?
Yeah. I think that's it, because registering to vote is as easy as signing up for a Facebook account.
It really is.
Going to vote is something different, unless you're listening to Russian bots who says that you can retweet this person to be able to cast your ballot. I'm reminded of Aziz Ansari thing.
But your point's well taken. Having done this show for decades now, you recognize the younger you are, the less likely you are to vote. But let's recognize that if we use the cutoff now that we've talked about, millennials being from 1980, say 1995, you're now talking about 20-something, 30-somethings. You're not talking,
years old.
You are not talking about teenagers now. You're talking about individuals who in the past were starting families, although your generation is starting families later because you're getting married later. But this is a generation that was voting, starting families, building careers, and all the rest. And so this is really interesting, because even the most recent survey says that the most entrepreneurial generation in American history are the millennials, interestingly enough, because the ones behind the IGN say, no, I'm not sure I want to ever run a business or anything like that. Matter of fact, I'll be glad to work overtime. They tend to be really work-oriented because they came of age during the Great Recession of 2008. But your generation, you came of age during, in some cases, the boom years of Clinton, the boom years of Bush, until, of course, it collapsed. And so you tend to be fairly optimistic about the economy, even though you may have had a lot of debt in school. But when it comes to voting, not necessarily the case, right?
Which is just I'm just very fascinated by this, because we're so quick to protest. I mean, I even saw a viral video, even just this morning. I probably shouldn't say that it was a viral video. I just saw a video that had been retweeted quite frequently, to the extent that it made its way into my timeline. And so there was a video. Senator Cruz is making his way to an airport.
I saw it.
Yeah,
I saw it.
and
Yeah, that's become viral. That has become viral.
There is
Yes.
a woman, and it seems as though she is younger in nature. She could identify as an elderly woman, for all I know. Hashtag 2018. And so she is younger in nature, and she is shaming and protesting Senator Cruz while he is in the airport, just like saying, "Shame on you, Ted Cruz! Shame on you!" and just yelling at him, which is just. But the good thing is you saw Senator Cruz just say, "God bless you. You're free to exercise your First Amendment
That's your First Amendment right.
You can do this."
Yeah.
And so, but it does bring up a great point, and I'll be interested to hear your perspective on this, Dave. Why are millennials so interested in protesting so quickly, but when it comes to actually having their voice heard the most effectively, aka voting, they're not doing it? It just is. It's fascinating to me.
Like I said before, I think it's a lot of surface level, and because of that, it just comes down to are we really like, do we know the whole story? And we're spending most of our time in social media where it's just basically just a few 100 characters, and that's it. And that's all we want to know. Next, what's next? What's next?
And I would be anxious to see numbers, and I'm sure this is knowable, numbers of individuals when you're talking about Kerby that are entrepreneurs. How many of them started web-based businesses? So like the social media influencers. There's such a market right now for individuals to make so much money being Instagram models or being these lifestyle brand people on social media that I wonder if that's the business that they form, little LLCs, to where they can. Those are all the little businesses for non-traditional sources of revenue relative to, and that would be very interesting.
We're making money on Fortnite.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, esport. Don't get me started on esports. Probably just because I'm frustrated that I was never good at video games, but that's a whole different point. I blame my parents for not letting me play video games, but forcing me into the library. But that's a whole different issue.
I would love to hear what our callers have to say. Maybe they have a reason why people aren't voting.
If you were
to hear from somebody who's not voting this year.
If you are not voting this year, we would love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, or if you're in Facebook land, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. I'd love to hear why you're not voting, if you're someone out there that's not voting. Or we'll open it up to people that are voting. If you know somebody that's not voting, call in 800-351-1212. Tell us the reason why, maybe some conversations that you have had with them. I think one of the interesting things that I've continued to hear about individuals that aren't voting is they're so sick and tired of it. They're just so sick and tired of it. And this comes from both sides of the aisle. This isn't, dear goodness, I know that there'll be individuals that are frustrated with me. We had our president of the United States call a woman a horse face yesterday. Dear goodness, this is where we are. This is where we are.
Stop talking.
We had someone questioning the masculinity of Senator Cruz. Yes, sir. It's just that we are at such a low level right now, and so I can understand unless you're motivated, a reason why to get out. But I think there's plenty of reasons why you might be unmotivated. But we would love to hear from you. Again, you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when we come back, we'll take some of your phone calls, and then we're also going to transition. I'm really interested to hear, Dave, some of your perspectives on this millennial generation, specifically some leadership components and also some of this entrepreneurial thing, because I think that's striking a chord with many individuals that probably maybe are bosses, managers right now that are having so much frustration with the millennials that are in their sphere, and how you might be able to help them in that particular space. But we'll be back right after this.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor, and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and we are so grateful that you decided to join us today. We have been talking a little bit about Beto O'Rourke and the Ted Cruz race right now for Senate. We're at Beto is challenging Senator Cruz, who is attempting to seek after re-election. And one of the interesting things I think would be one of the primary pieces that individuals are going after Senator Cruz for. We actually had him on air last week. Kirby, I don't know if you happen to hear that we had Senator Cruz on air, and he was telling us a little bit about the legislation that he's trying to move forward right now relative to school safety measures, as well as making the tax cuts permanent and working with Senator Rubio on some of that. And so he's trying to address some of those issues that individuals have. But I think many individuals, and this is where we left right before the break, many individuals are just feeling very apathetic right now. I know that we emphasize, especially on Wednesdays, individuals are feeling apathetic that are millennials. That just feel as though politics is corrupt, it's toxic, I'm tired of hearing about horse faces and liars and porn stars in Russia. I can't believe that this is where we're at. It can be entertaining to some people, but for those that just feel very disenchanted with it and have tuned out completely to it. And so we opened up the phone lines, and we are asking individuals specifically that are not voting or know someone that's not voting the rationale as to why they're not voting. And so a couple of you have called in, but you are more than welcome to call in. The number is 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. And so we're going to jump on over to Indiana right now. We've got Elroy on the line. Elroy, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Elroy, what's your point of view?
Well, my point of view, just to set a base real quick, is oddly enough, I used to vote Democratic, and Obama ruined that for me. But so I lean way left, and my point of view, my daughter, she says she won't vote, and that is because she doesn't want to get involved with politics. But that whole generation there still will give their point of view as far as how they disagree or don't agree with it. And I don't know that it's a very strong point of view. I just think that they are sober. I don't know. I mean, first time caller. A little nervous.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, I completely understand. So Elroy, I've got some friends that are similar to that. They're just I disagree with them pretty vehemently, and it seems as though they're just turned off by it. But they're also and I don't mean any disrespect by this. I have a lot of friends that are just misinformed. If I could just be so blunt right now, I don't know if that's relating with what you're talking about.
Well, I think that is truth, and not that there's anything us little people can do about it, but the media portrays what they want to portray. And like for example, I mean, and I knew this before Trump said fake news. I mean, growing up, I had a buddy of mine that says you need to be careful what you listen to on the news because they give what they want to give. And I'm not saying that's the way for every little newscast. But I will say that there's some things on local TV that people buy into, and I don't necessarily believe it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for example, me and my if I may say this, me and my wife both voted for Trump. We were never going to vote for Hillary,
mm-hmm.
and my daughter would have voted for her because she was part of the Obama legacy, and her boyfriend's family, not that it bothers us, but are African American, and now she's getting married, which is totally fine because we love their family, but they convinced her that the left or the right was racist. And so in her mind, that's where she would lean because she's being, I don't know, I'm not going to say manipulated. It's a little strong word. She's being pushed that way because, I mean, like for CNN and some of the others, they throw it out there that, you know, that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was doing some research the other day, and this really isn't from a news perspective. It's just from a media perspective that we are largely, I don't want to say largely, there is a contingent that is individuals that watch reality TV show is largely shaped by reality TV. And you have individuals that are keeping up with the Kardashians, specifically in this study, that indicated that they were less empathetic, that they didn't extend as much generosity or altruism tendencies when they were watching so much of the TV. And so I think that's some of the things that we always have known to be true, especially from a Christian perspective. We just know that we're very malleable in nature, that literally the biblical narrative compares us to clay. And that we hopefully are going to be, to such an extent, especially from the Christian perspective, closer to the potter than to the fires in this world. So we're just not a melting heap of nothing to a large degree. But I think you bring up some really great points, Elroy, and thank you so much for what you're saying. Because, Kerby, I think that to a large degree, we've always known that there's certain media outlets that have more of a left bent to them.
Of course.
I think one of the good things that were happening now, especially with the proliferation and the pervasiveness of the internet, is it's opening up more of right-leaning sites as well to be able to give a fuller expression of the truth. But it still doesn't change the fact that some of these, we'll call them mainstream media, just to be able to use the moniker, have that prime real estate that individuals just gravitate towards. And all too often, the story, it might not be fake, but it's framed in such a way that it could lean towards liberal perspectives.
Right. And he mentioned the idea that as soon as you hear the word racist, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you and I say so often is read widely.
Mm-hmm.
As people read your daily briefing, they can see that you read a lot of different things from a lot of different perspectives, and we try to post some different things as well. But certainly what you find is when somebody says that's racist or that's xenophobic or it's homophobic or whatever label, I think there's a legitimate question to say, why do you say that?
Yeah.
Because then lots of times you get this nothing more. And that's part of the problem sometimes with those who are not politically involved. They've heard the moniker, they've heard the phrase, they repeat the phrase, and that's it. And so that makes it real easy for me to not be involved and go on about my life. And so I won't vote, and I don't get involved, and I won't watch these programs, and I'll find out what the Kardashians are doing tomorrow.
Yeah, I won't find out. God bless them. So let's jump on over to Paige in South Carolina right now. Paige, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so Paige, I see with one of our producers has written on the note you're a millennial, so I just have to ask, are you an Oregon Trail millennial? Do you remember playing Oregon Trail?
No.
Did you search for where in the world Carmen Sandiego was?
No.
Okay, did you meet Boy and Boy Meets World?
No.
Ah, Paige, what are your millennial childhood memories? What are we working with here?
I don't know.
Were you a Nickelodeon kid?
Yeah.
Okay,
thank goodness. We got one win. The Rugrats or Doug? Or Cat Dog?
Yeah, cat, dog, all those.
Okay, deal. Okay, well, now that I've moved us away from actually the whole point of the conversation, nevertheless, what is your point of view?
Everybody listening that isn't a millennial goes, I don't understand any of the questions.
They don't know about the pace that you're supposed to take your cart. You don't want to tire your oxens out on the Oregon Trail. That's a whole different story.
I do know the Oregon Trail, only because of my kids. Go ahead.
But nevertheless, Paige, what's your point of view?
Okay, so my father has never been registered to vote, probably never will be, doesn't watch the news, so I come from this background of politics don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've always been like that. But now that I'm 21 on my own, dating an attorney who dabbles in politics, so naturally, I have to listen to CNN, I have to listen to talk radio.
There you
go. So, things are starting to sink in, but I've always grown up thinking, that in the aggregate, your vote, your individual vote doesn't matter, because who's to say that your representative is going to turn in, what voters are saying. You see, Hillary won the popular vote, but Electoral College, she didn't, she's not the president. So, all these things, just growing up thinking your individual vote doesn't matter. But, triply voting does matter, and I'm starting to realize that just, as I'm getting older and I'm not living with, those point of views from my father anymore. But, that's my personal, it's just never been important in our family.
That's fascinating. So, Paige, would you say that's kind of prevalent not only outside your family, but also in your friend group as well, that your vote doesn't matter?
Well, yeah, that's where I've come from. I don't know. It's just different.
No. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's a unique perspective. Especially, did you grow up in South Carolina, too?
No, I grew up in Florida. I just moved to South Carolina a month ago.
Oh, wow. So even in Florida. So I'm thinking about from the perspective of just thinking Florida's always been kind of one of those states that just has so much significance in the Electoral College. You can go back to 2000, 2004, 2008. Every presidential election. That's fascinating. Well, Paige, thank you so much for calling.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. Well, we have got to take a break. When we come back from the break, I'll be really interested to hear. We've got a couple more individuals that are calling in that are talking about some of their frustrations, their perspectives on individuals that rationales as to why they're not voting. They know someone that's not voting. We'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, and we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. It's fair to say that the state of Oklahoma takes high school sports pretty seriously. The Oklahoma Secondary School Athletic Association, or OSA, regulates high school sports. Public schools are admitted freely, but private schools must apply for membership. In 1998, Christian Heritage Academy, known widely for its 8-man football team, applied to be a member of OSA, but were denied. They applied again in 1999, but the majority of members rejected them a second time. That was enough for them, and the school filed a lawsuit in 2003 alleging that they had been denied the equal protection of the law and deprived of their First Amendment freedoms. The court concluded that OSA's rules were discriminatory by stating that a majority of members could simply reject religious schools over secular schools for any reason or none at all. The court found there was no legitimate purpose served. OSA members could, the court noted, reject applications for membership for any reason including dislike or distrust. Of course, the court was willing to allow OSA to chart its own membership, but it had to be fair. Creating a system that allowed ample room for members to reject religious schools just because they did not like them was not enough. The court's point is clear. The First Amendment requires precision. When the state acts without precision, rights can be quickly abused. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable. We've got Kerby Anderson and David Fraga. We've been talking about individuals that have decided not to vote or rationales as to why individuals aren't voting. It's been fascinating to hear some phone calls. We've heard everything from kind of the disinformation, just kind of being discombobulated based on where individuals, what's true, what's not true. There are individuals out of South Carolina and Florida that have been talking about how it's just not really important. It doesn't really, your vote really doesn't count, which is just, it's just fascinating how we're all shaped in some form or fashion. I think we're all cognizant of the fact that we are, contrary to John Locke, we are not blank slates, that we come into this world and we have been shaped by certain forces, and then we are continually nurtured and shaped by our parents and by other close individuals as well. And it's just fascinating to hear some of your perspectives as to rationales as to why you wouldn't vote. And so I remember as a kid, Kerby, I was just always captivated by the electoral process. And I still can vividly remember there was an old governor in Tennessee named Ned McWhorter. he was a Tennessee legend. And I remember when Phil Bredesen, who's currently running for Senate right now, he would be the oldest freshman senator ever elected. And so I think 76 would be his age. And I remember when Phil was running for governor at the time, and I went to a campaign rally, and Ned McWhorter was there. He was, I don't know if he was the current governor. No, it couldn't have been, because I think Don Sundquist was buying. I'm not sure. I'll have to look back at that. But Ned McWhorter, and I just remember being in awe. It was like I was a little kid seeing Shaquille O'Neal or something like that. So there was always just that weightiness to it.
I might just mention, too, that one of the things we make available is information on the midterm election resources. So just even as you were talking, I clicked on the picture of Tennessee, pulled up Phil Bredesen, and actually he was born November 21st, 1943, and gives his religion, his background, his graduate from Harvard University and all the rest. But for people in any state, just simply go to that on the website, because a lot of people say, where do I find out more information? So in the middle section there, it says 2008 midterm election resources. Now, each day we update it, so each day you'll find a little bit more, but if you go and click through the part that says read more, then you can go to your state. I'll go to Texas right now for the moment, just because we're broadcasting from Texas. It has the two candidates, Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. It has the governor candidates all the way down. Not all the way down to dog catcher, but pretty close. And then it shows you where you can find your polling place, how you can register to vote. Now, most of us in most of the states have already passed the chance to register to vote, but some of you can register up to Election Day. And then it shows you what you might need if you go to the polls on Election Day in terms of identification. It has the dates, and then it has information about each one of the candidates, including who has supported them. And that's sometimes helpful. Yeah. And if they filled out one of those applications and one of those surveys, you know a little bit more. So that's just another reason why I think sometimes, Nick, we find people say, well, I don't know who to vote for, so that's why I'm not voting. Well, we've given you the information so you can make an intelligent choice.
Yeah, it's a great resource and opportunity. And so let's keep on going to the phone lines. I'll be really interested to hear. And if you want to call in, that number is 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, or jump over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. So let's jump over to Penny right now. Penny, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, Penny, what's your point of view?
My point of view is I'm from Alaska, and I do not believe that my vote counts. Everybody else's vote is in before I even... I mean, I can vote, yeah, but you know who the president is before our votes are even counted. And, again, I'm going to complain about the whole Internet thing. Not everybody is on Facebook, Internet, blah, blah, and I don't want to be. But being from Alaska, people can't even get Internet where they're living, in the villages or out of town. I mean, I used to live 80 miles out of town. You don't get the Internet out there. So, you know, everybody keeps talking about, well, check on the Internet and do this and do that. You can't check on the Internet if you're living in Alaska.
Yeah.
So,
and I've been up to KJNP up there in North Pole, Alaska, so I know what it's like. You know, but again, that's the advantage of listening to some of the radio stations, because they can at least share some of the things they have been able to dig up and pass on to you as well. And I appreciate you listening to this program, because if nothing else, we're trying to educate you. But, you know, Nick, you lived in Tennessee, but I used to live in California, and listeners in California say the same thing that listeners in Hawaii and Alaska say. It's already over by the time we go to the polls that night. Even before the polls close, we already know who the president is. Yeah. But on the other elections, still very important.
Yeah. What were you saying, Penny?
I was saying, yeah, it's kind of over by the time I guess I'm an MS survivor. I've had MS for 22 years. Therefore, I don't drive anymore. So you get somebody to give you a ride to go vote. And that's fine, but it's over by the time your vote's counted. So why even bother to vote, which is kind of a sad thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Well, Penny, thank you so much for your phone call. I think I'm one of those, I just am enchanted by the magic of Election Day, right? And so even though I know I'm in Texas, and I guess to a certain degree you can rationalize your way and just say that no one's vote counts in Texas because there's a large majority that will vote Republican. most of the time. And so you can say, I can vote however I want. And it's very obvious if you've been listening which way that I vote. But nevertheless, it's just very magical to me. I love going. I love being there with the poll workers that have volunteered their time to be able to work the area and to work the precinct. And it's just, I'm just captivated by this idea of free elections where individuals are willingly giving up their positions in order that there might be a peaceful transition of power, and that we have the opportunity without need of encumbrance or without need of fear of persecution to be able to go and to magically cast our ballot and believe it to be true that this right that is soaked in blood because of individuals that have come before us have the opportunity to be able to leverage that freedom so that we might be able to freely elect our leaders that can lead us towards a more prosperous nation. It's just a magical place for me. And you can tell it's like I'm reading a storybook right now. I'm just so excited just because of it. But David, did you grow up in a home in which kind of the electoral process was something, politics was something that was talked about pretty widely, or was it just kind of another thing that was just on the list?
Absolutely. It was, I came from a culture that was such like a moment, so exciting to do just because I come from a family of immigrants. I'm first generation American.
Oh, wow.
So that was just such an exciting thing for us to be able to be a part of something great and be able to help make a decision for our country to peacefully and seem like not corruptly transition into power.
Yeah, that's so rich. I'm exceedingly grateful for it. And Kerby, I know that you grew up in a family in which politics was pretty prevalent.
You and I have something in common, and that is both our fathers ran for office, so we know all about that. But I just love that because, if you've ever been around a new citizen, somebody who's newly naturalized that passed a citizenship test, what a concept, passed a citizenship test, their excitement about being able to cast their first vote in America is just a reminder of this precious opportunity that we have in November that I hope we won't squander.
It's a great opportunity, but we've got to take a break. But when we get back from the break, we're going to transition topics a little bit. I'll be really interested to hear. So David is kind of a guru expert on kind of the millennials, but also on leadership as well. And so we'll talk a little bit more about leadership, and especially political leadership, business leadership, and some of the ethics of it. And I'll be interested to hear, too, David, your perspective relative to the Me Too movement, kind of in this world in which, what does it mean to be a man in a world it seems like we're emasculating men, but also it's very detrimental and very hard to be a man. I think the polling is just very clear on that. We don't even know what is a man in today's world. So we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. We'll also be taking some of your phone calls, and so you'll be able to call in 800-351-1212. But we've got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, more from Point of View. And so we'll be back right after this.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor, and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and we're so grateful that you decided to join us today for this Millennial Roundtable. We've got David Fraga with us, as well as Kerby Anderson, and we have been talking, we've kind of been dancing around the millennial perspective, if we're just honest. During the first hour, we had Kathy Ward in studio. We talked all there is about the debate that happened last night between Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Beto O'Rourke, and how it seemed as though Congressman O'Rourke was very much aggressive in nature, very animated. There was a different Beto O'Rourke than what we've seen previously, and that's probably indicative of the polls continue to show a wider and wider chasm. And so we talked a little bit about that, analyzed that debate, one might be able to say. Second hour, we continued to talk about Ted Cruz, but we also began to talk more about the millennial perspective. Why aren't millennials engaging in the political process? And then I think it's really important. We've heard some comments that came online as well. One of our producers came in and were telling me that we want to differentiate between the millennial generation and then the iGen generation, that there's pretty significant differences. There's a Turkish proverb that says that if I burn my mouth with hot milk, I'll blow on my yogurt. It's kind of along the phrase of we just swing to the other end of the pendulum. And so millennials swung to one end, and now it seems as though iGen is swinging to another end. It's really unclear right now what is the iGen generation. I think some numbers are putting it anywhere from the late 90s is kind of the starting point, 95 to 98. Some estimates have it up to where we're at today. But so there's still some ambiguity to it, to the definite markers that we have. But nevertheless, there is a difference. And so I want to make that differentiation. But now during this hour, let's just go full in, everybody. So I want to talk about specifically, we'll continue to talk about like why aren't millennials engaging in the political process, and then this whole idea of being a man. Okay, so I'll tell my qualms, and this was the soapbox that I got on right during the break right now. And sometimes, like I continually say, it's probably better. I wish sometimes they had the microphones off when we're off air than when they're on air, because sometimes I just get a chance just to. My soapbox right now, I'll just go ahead and say it, is that when people are writing articles on what it takes to be a man, or what is a man in today's generation, I find as though we're identifying characteristics of what is a man, and I'd say yes and amen to that. But it seems as though those are the same characteristics that we would apply to being a woman. So we would say something along the lines of, we expect men to be responsible. Now, yes and amen, but I also expect women to take responsibility as well. We expect men to show integrity and to be brave. Well, yes and amen, but I would expect that of females as well, because I think those are large characteristics. And so I'm really interested on specifically what are the differentiating characteristics, and you can use social science research, history, or just common sense. I'd be really interested to know specifically what it is to be a man, and then we can build out from there what it takes in order to, what differentiates a man from a woman outside of the biological features. So nevertheless, that's where we're going to be moving to in this hour. David, I'm animated, as you can tell on this point. I want to talk about this. I want to debate this. I want to pull on my PhD hat and just be an inquisitive little punk, is probably what my professors would say about this. And so let's just go ahead and tackle this first, okay? You've done significant amount of work that you're currently involved at your church and Gateway. You're developing men. So help us understand from your church standpoint what it is that you're doing to develop men. Kingdom men is what it says.
Well, there's a lot of white noise out there. There's a lot of confusion.
Okay.
And that's one of the biggest things that I try to all right, let's create some clarity.
Okay.
Right. Let's actually dive into the Bible and see all these men of faith.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, what is it that they do?
Yeah.
That just makes them want to be men after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a big part of it is making the tough choices.
Okay.
Simply.
Okay.
But because there's so much confusion, man, it's like we don't want to do anything. We don't want to have anything to do with it.
So like a paralysis by analysis.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So men make choices.
Tough choices, not
Tough
just any choices.
Okay. Would you say women make tough choices?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's still a characteristic that it's not differentiating a man from a woman. What are some other things?
There's 4 pillars that I like to talk about.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So it's race, The first thing is responsibility. And that's accepting the responsibility that you need, as a man, as a leader in general.
Okay.
And the second thing is action, right? Okay. So it's rejecting passivity. It's not allowing complacency to creep into your life. Okay. The third thing is courage. So it's leading courageously. It's not the absence of fear, but it's overcoming fear, right? And the last thing is excellency. It's investing eternally to the next generation.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, so we've got let's go to the first characteristic, so responsibility, okay? Is that the first characteristic?
Yeah, accept
okay, so we've got accept responsibility. Give me some biblical undergirding for this to help me understand where is it in the biblical narrative that would indicate that I need to accept responsibility for my decisions.
Absolutely. So you see, first of all, 1 Corinthians. Paul's talking about the church, how we each have different roles, and it talks about how, as men have roles, women have roles. Not just that, but we can go into 1 Peter where it talks about shepherding of the flock. 1 Peter 5 it talks about how, hey, when you have a flock to shepherd, right, in the right time, you have to humble yourself, be a servant. And then you see Jesus, the ultimate leader. I mean, he washed his disciples' feet.
Yeah.
And he was, when everyone was sitting around in the circle, the disciples were like, oh, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
It's not for me, right?
And then, of course, Peter's like, I washed my whole body, Jesus. Shocking twist, Peter goes all in.
But you see that Jesus is like, hey, this is what it looks like. And in reality, us as men, we have that pride. We're like, oh, we don't want to be the least. At least I didn't come in last. At least I didn't do this, And in reality, Jesus like, no, until you become the least of these, right?
Okay.
And so it's taking that responsibility, like, hey, we are created for dominion, but what does that look like? And it's countercultural from what we hear and all the noise and the confusion.
Okay, so would you say that men are supposed to take dominion, and do women take dominion based on that Genesis narrative?
So I want to talk briefly about that.
Yeah.
And it's really abused, right?
Okay.
Because they're like, oh, submission. Yeah, you need to do what I say, this and that.
Yeah.
But in reality, what is submission really? And I'm reading through a book. It's like Celebration of Disciplines.
Yeah. Richard Foster's phenomenal.
Amazing book.
We've all read that. Yeah.
And he talks about in the chapter of submission, talks about self-denial, which actually leads to self-actualization.
Yeah.
And the reality of that is because our culture is like, okay, if you can make the most noise, if you can come off as the biggest, most intimidating thing, then you are the leader. But what does it actually look like to lead?
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to take responsibility and to have that role? And then, okay, understanding this is what you're supposed to do.
So when you talk about self-denial, would you not say, though, from a submission standpoint, there's 2 aspects I would highlight from this.
Absolutely.
So there's the Ephesians 5:22 that the wives are to submit to their husbands, but then we also can go one verse before and say that we all submit to one another.
Yeah.
And so submission doesn't seem to be a differentiating characteristic between a man and a woman. And then there's the self-denial component, and I'll give you that. But I'll also say that Jesus opens that up to both genders, right? When he says that anyone that would come and follow after me must deny themselves, pick up their cross, and follow after me. And so it seems as though, especially from the first one, responsibilities, there doesn't seem to be a differentiating aspect between a man and a woman. Response?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to go back to we're gonna have to take a break right now. But we'd love to hear from you. I would thoroughly enjoy hearing from one of our listeners right now. What are the differentiating factors between a man and a woman outside of the biological world? What does it take to be a man that we would not call a woman to do? Or it would be it would not be as prevalent. So I know that there's certain things that wouldn't be as prevalent from a woman's perspective as it would be from a man's perspective. I would love to hear from you. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. And when we get back from the break, we're going to continue to go through this race, which I think is a phenomenal little thing, a little acrostic that we've got. And so we'll kind of expound upon that, and then we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The new book by David Green has the arresting title, Giving It All Away. He is the founder of Hobby Lobby and tells the story of his success and calls for Christians to give generously to churches and other ministries. He was on my radio program last week, and we talked about Hobby Lobby, the Museum of the Bible, and the court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Green family has been at the center of all this and much more. Most people know that Hobby Lobby is closed on Sunday. They may not also realize that their stores close earlier than other stores. That means they're only open 66 hours a week and compete with stores open many more hours. David Green did this so that his employees can spend more time with their families. Hobby Lobby also pays its full-time employees well. Back in 2009, they raised their base pay to $10 an hour. The next year, they tacked on $1. The next year, they did it again and then again. This is another way that the Green family values their employees. I asked David Green if he ever imagined that he would have to sue the federal government. The thought never crossed his mind, but they did so when the HHS mandate would have required them to provide abortifacients for their employees. The fines alone would have cost him $1.3 million per day. Much of his book focuses on giving and challenges Christians to engage in the adventure of tithing. He has 3 principles they use and encourages all of us to implement them as well. First, set your criteria. What are you going to fund? What are your priorities? Second, set your giving amount. Give the first fruits, not what is left over. And finally, set fire for the future. He also has thought quite a bit about how to make generosity generational. His book is certain to spark your interest and encourage you in giving. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by Kerby Anderson. And Dave, we've been talking a little bit about what it means to be a man and what differentiates between a man and a woman. If you'll remember, during the first part of that last segment, I said, I wish you all could hear what we talk about off air. And outside of my cussing and some and my smoke breaks, no, I'm just kidding. That's not me. That's not me. But nevertheless, one of the things Kerby brought up a really great point that I think was very illuminating, that yet again, Kerby, in his ever so wise way, humbled my bull rushing tendencies right now in a desire to know more. And so, Kerby, share with us what you were sharing during the break. I think
all I'm saying is that, we don't always want to see it as an either or. You remember in grade school the Venn diagrams or something like that. And that is, I think there's a gradation. Yes, men are going to be more responsible. Men are going to generally be more courageous. Men are more likely to exercise dominion. Does that mean women never do? No, I know a lot of strong women that do. But the reality is that generally men are acting out of their general nature. That's what you were asking. What differentiates a man? Is it a perfect, clear yes or no, light switch on or off? No, I think it's more of a gradation. But generally, you would agree that even as a soccer player, the way men play soccer and the way women play soccer is very different. It's the same game, but it's really different because men and women are different, right?
Absolutely. I don't want to get in trouble here, but
no way.
Yeah.
No
They're
way.
both fun to watch, but the reality, I'm not trying to put one down. I'm just saying they play differently. I'm not even saying good or bad, just saying they're playing differently.
Yeah.
And men exercise dominion differently than women, generally. And so if you understand that, then that maybe helps a little bit when we talk about the race. But let's talk about that again.
Yeah, so let's go. So we did responsibility. Let's move on to the A. Give us again the A, David.
Action.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about action.
Yeah, so action is rejecting passivity. You know, too often in our lives, we see complacency creep in, kind of like the voting thing. We're like, okay, there's too much noise. It's too hard. Like, nah, I just rather not touch that. I have a roommate of mine who, instead of voting, conservative or Democratic, he was like, I think I'm just going to do independent because I'm in the middle. So I feel like that's the middle. And I'm like, hey, that's not the middle, man. But
Yeah.
Or it's better. At least he voted, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just like, okay, what does it look like to actually reject passivity, which means to like, okay, say no to not doing anything at all, right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I can get on with that. I still think that I don't know the gradation. So like you're part of the. I don't know if that applies in this. I think
maybe not so much there.
Yeah, not so much there. So let's keep on going to the next one. C.
Courage.
Okay, tell me a little bit about courage.
So courage, I talk about leading courageously, which is not the absence of fear. Too many people say that, fear is such a bad thing, but in reality, you see over time, it's like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge, wisdom, And in reality, leading courageously is overcoming fear.
Okay.
It's saying I'm not led by that. It's saying that, my fear is in the Lord only. My awe is captured by him.
Yeah.
Right. So that's exactly what courage means.
Yeah, and I guess we can make to a certain extent the gradation argument that would be made there. I think men are more the flight and flight component is there to a certain degree. I mean, I don't want to brag, Kirby. I know. Kirby wants to box me right now. No, I hope not, because
this
I would
guy
lose.
hits a bag all the time, and his knuckles show for it. Right?
As you all know, I've taken my fair share of boxing classes, and as long as the bag doesn't punch back, I'm okay. But when the bag starts to punch back, that might be a little bit more detrimental. And so, because I have about as much athletic talent as Texas has pork barbecue, but nevertheless, that's a totally different story. Probably a prayer request more than anything. Okay, so tell me, E is for excellence, right?
Excellence, yes.
Okay.
So this is, excellency in doing more by yourself. The first page of Purpose Driven Life says it's not about you. It's not about you. And there's promises time after time that's generational, right, that God makes to his people. And since we are his people, it is like what we do and how we develop other leaders.
Okay.
So it's investing eternally
to
the next generation, the people you pour into.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and again, I think I probably wouldn't put the gradation part on there just because I'm thinking about excellence. I think we're all called to excellence in our various different spheres, and so okay, I'll give you the gradation part for the R for responsibility, and then for courage to a certain degree.
RNC. Yeah.
So we're talking about RC Cola, but nevertheless, we're going to go to the phone
some
call.
of your thoughts too.
Yeah,
I'd like to get your comments.
Yeah,
too.
so this is where I struggle with right now, just because
there aren't as many.
Yeah, because
the feminist movement has changed some of that too.
Here's where I get really frustrated on my point. So the New York Times came up with a piece 2 weeks ago that indicated that was talking about an op-ed columnist that said when being a good daddy promotes you to mommy. And I just think that's just wrong. That's just wrong. Like a child needs both a mom and a dad. I think that's a beautiful component that you have the propensity and opportunity to be able to raise a very well-founded child. Now, am I saying that because someone doesn't have a mom and a dad that they can't be raised as a well-rounded, good, productive citizen child? No, not at all. I know that there are many single parents out there right now that are going above and beyond and are heroes of our communities because of everything that they're doing. But I am saying that there isn't when there is a mother and there is a father present, it has the propensity as well as the potential to be able to produce a well-rounded, productive citizen of a child.
One other thing I'd like to have you discuss after we go to the phones, and that is the biggest difficulty, David, is for a young boy to figure out how to be a man. Because a young boy goes through a woman's world to try to learn how to be a man. Think of who they will have in elementary school. Most of the teachers are female. Think of who they might even, if they go to church, will have as a Sunday school teacher. It will be a female. By the time they get to middle school, they run into an occasional man here or there. But again, part of the struggle that I think we're facing in our culture is it used to be that boys learned how to be a man next to a man. They were in the farm and they were farming together. They were in a shop and they were helping the dad shopkeeper. And so in some respects now, because of the nature of our 21st century society, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is a young boy has to try to figure out how to be a man when he's not really surrounded by that many men.
Absolutely. And I think pop culture has a huge influence on that. And a lot of false manhood comes out of that. You see all these rappers, they want to be that. And so they start trying to pretend to be that. And so their identity is in what they try to control. In reality, they have no idea who they are when you dig deep under the surface.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Okay, so we're going to go to the phone calls. We didn't even ask for phone calls, but nevertheless, we have some people that want to talk, and we are grateful because I want to be able to argue or to listen to certain, but argue in a very respectful and then a very civil way. Just knowing, listeners, please know that when I say argue, I'm coming at it from an academic perspective, and that's like a kiss on the cheek. It's like I love you enough to be able to engage with you. It's not necessarily the aggressive. I want to demonize you and say that you're Hitler. I just want to engage the ideas, and so that's what I love about point of view. Point of view. At the end of the day, we are the open opportunity because we know that at the end of the day, truth always wins out. Where we just try to identify truth wherever it is, inside the biblical narrative, outside the biblical narrative, point people to Jesus in order that they might be productive citizens in this world. Ever so grateful for Point of View, and you can, if you want to donate, you can go to pointofview.net. But nevertheless, let's go to the phone lines right now, shall we? So we can go over to Eleanor in Georgia right now. Eleanor, are you there?
I am.
In the Peach State. Eleanor, what is your point of view?
My point of view, I'm going to kind of switch to what I was thinking of and piggyback on to the men being raised by women. That is, you see that more in schools, and I've just discussed that within our school, that there's all women bringing up these men. And the problem is women in the world today, it's great that they want to be equal, but when you look at it from a biblical realm, and you're supposed to, look at your father and your husband raising men to God the Father, it needs to be with some reverence to all that man. So I think when it comes to manners, when it comes to knowing how to do things like Boy Scouts, all those kind of things are kind of going to some extent by the wayside, and a man might be in the kitchen with his mom learning how to make muffins, or a boy trying to get, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that men need to be in men's groups. They need to, some of that because their time is limited, parents are working longer, the man of the house is maybe traveling more. Sometimes even with the working woman, at the end of the day, everybody wants the man to take charge, I think, in order to be the man of the house.
Yeah, I completely agree, Eleanor. I was blessed enough to have a very strong father that was very present with me, and that was just very supportive of me, and made me what was one of their initiatives, both of my parents, is to be a well-rounded man. So I learned how to fail making blueberry muffins, even though my appetite really wanted to make those successful blueberry muffins. But I also had to learn to play piano, and I had to try sports and fail miserably at baseball. Do somewhat decent at basketball, but nevertheless, it forced me to be very well-rounded. But nevertheless, we're going to have to take a break. But when we come back from the break, we are going to pick up your comment, Eleanor, because I think there's a unique opportunity for the church as well to come alongside some of these young families, to have men speak into young men's lives as well. We'll be back right after this.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife Jenny was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and we have been talking about manhood. Specifically, what does it mean to be a man in today's culture? And I guess if the phone lines are any indication, some of you have an opinion on it. I came in like a bull in a china shop right now during the beginning of the hour, just very much trying to figure out what does it mean specifically, because when you look at the biblical narrative and then even just some of the popular articles that are populating kind of the headlines today about what it means to be a man, it doesn't seem as though they're making any differentiating factors relative to men and women. And so I've been pressing on this because I want to know, what does it mean to be a man in today's culture? I'm keenly aware that we're living in a world today in which women, like we talked about during the first hour, women are experiencing a type of predator nature that's going on, because 1 in 6 have been attempted or have been sexually abused. And so I'm keenly aware that we have men that are acting like boys. I think one of the popular phrases is that boys that can shave right now. But what does it mean to be a man? And so we have been taking some of your phone calls, and so you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212, or you can jump on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio if you can't get through, because all the phone lines are completely busy from Georgia to Arizona to Alaska. We're all over the place right now. And so let's jump on over to, let's go to New Mexico right now. We've got Debbie in New Mexico. Debbie, are you there?
Hi there, I am.
Hey, Debbie, what's your point of view?
Well, I was going to comment on the voting and just how it's so overwhelming, especially for my 2 men and my husband. He just kind of relies upon me to research and tell him who to vote for. Uh-huh. And I think my boys, they're both 20 and able to vote, and I had to register them, but still when it comes down to, like, you need to go vote today, they just won't do it. And one at college was approached by a canvasser from California, and he goes to university in Arizona, and they said, well, let's register to vote. And I'm thinking, how is that even legal? Like, how do you register a New Mexico person in Arizona from California? I don't know. It's just so messed up.
Yeah, I do know that Arizona is in a pretty tight Senate race right now. You got Sinema and McSally that are kind of going after it in that race, and so that could be a way. I know that there's some work going on. I can't remember the college. It might be in Georgia, Kerby. I'm not sure. There's a Georgia college. There's a college in a toss-up state right now where they don't allow the students to register to vote at the college in particular, and so it's primarily targeting an African American population. Mm-hmm. So it's a long-standing statute, but I do know that there's always been those tactics on both the left and the right. But I do think that there's that masculine mentality, and I think this would be a thing that would apply both to men and to women, of exercising the right that has been so courageously fought for us and sacrificed for us over the years. But nevertheless, thank you so much, Debbie. We're greatly appreciative of that. Let's jump up to Alaska right now. We've got Timothy in Alaska. Are you there, Timothy?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Timothy.
I'd like to comment on the psychosociologic idea of identity politics. The boys in school today are told that they are a predatory beast that is set up to be a tyrant over other women. They're put into a group identity of white male cis, and they're told that their opinions are the least credible of all the sociological groups in the identity politics. There is just nothing good about single mothers raising boys, courageous as it may be, and to hope for a decent, well-adjusted personality when they reach adulthood. Toxic masculinity is how the typical male behavior is regarded by the feminist cadre. It's going to school, although the UAF isn't exactly a liberal arts campus, but it was still frightening. The identity politics were just arriving when I was on my way out, so I didn't have to suffer through it. But there is such a attack against men, and women complain that men aren't good men or real men. Well, what's the standard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm most interested in, Timothy. It's just the sense that we're against something, and I think that there's a legitimate sense that I'm against men that are predators. I myself am against men that prey upon women. I myself are against men that sexually abuse women. Like I'm for that. But I want to know. I want to know more than just what I'm against. I want to know what I'm for. What are we building? I know that the characteristics I don't want to be emulated across the gender, male sex. But what is it that we want to be for? What are the men that we're trying to shape right now? Would be my bigger question that I would have.
Well, I think that the feminist idea that misandry is just a joke and it doesn't actually exist, but misogyny is the air that we breathe. The misandry in the media and commercial advertising, I don't think I'm being too far-fetched when I say that equality is good, but a reverse matriarchy defeating the white male patriarchy is just absurd. It's a postmodernist, neo-Marxist idea that boys are really in trouble, I would say. Then boys need to hear stories from men, advice from men about how to be a man.
Yeah.
To be raised by example rather than by rhetoric.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much, Timothy. We greatly appreciate your phone call and greatly appreciate the time and insights that you've offered. Kerby, I'm really excited. We've got Jerry in South Carolina right now. Jerry, are you there?
I'm here.
And so looking at the show notes right now, Jerry, it seems as though you're going to be the answer to Timothy's question right now. You've raised 4 sons, okay? So you can comment on what it takes to be a man because you've raised 4 of them.
Well, I can. To start with, at the 23rd week of pregnancy, testosterone passes through the male brain and severs half of the synapses between the 2 halves of the brain. So men and women think differently.
Okay.
To say anything else is ludicrous and non-scientific, but that's what I expect from certain points. As a result, men tend to make decisions more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The way I've heard it put is that a man making an important decision, building a house, for instance, will look in a hallway, see 4 or 5 doors that are all open and mostly empty. A woman will open the same door, see 50 doors that are all closed and filled to the ceiling with boxes within boxes. And she has to open every one before she can make the first decision. Okay, that's an important difference because the women given time, especially in relationships, will frequently make the right relationship, and the husband should listen to his wife.
Okay.
Another difference being that half of the male brain is related to spatial relationships. So men tend to be drive better. They tend to catch better. They tend to be more related to sports. This is a tendency, not an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Women tend to be more relational because half of their brain, guess what, is going towards relationships. So they are nurturers. Men are providers and protectors. We go out to defend and beat the world. I mean, we hear all the time, man dies defending women and children. That's normal. That is manhood. Boys have to know that they are the protector. They are the defender. They are the last defense for the family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they have to know that. They have to you know, I was shot when I was 19, and there were 4 women in the restaurant. It didn't occur to me to run. People asked me later, and said, it never crossed my mind. That's malehood. That's manhood. That's what you have to do. It's just part of who you are.
Yeah.
There's so many differences.
Yeah.
Those are just some of the basics.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for your phone call. You've definitely illuminated, and even though only half of my brain's working right now, no, I'm just kidding. Well, we got to run to a break right now, but when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking about what it means to be a man, and specifically what differentiates a man from a woman. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. It's fair to say that the state of Oklahoma takes high school sports pretty seriously. The Oklahoma Secondary School Athletic Association, or OSA, regulates high school sports. Public schools are admitted freely, but private schools must apply for membership. In 1998, Christian Heritage Academy, known widely for its 8-man football team, applied to be a member of OSA, but were denied. They applied again in 1999, but the majority of members rejected them a second time. That was enough for them, and the school filed a lawsuit in 2003 alleging that they had been denied the equal protection of the law and deprived of their First Amendment freedoms. The court concluded that OSA's rules were discriminatory by stating that a majority of members could simply reject religious schools over secular schools for any reason or none at all. The court found there was no legitimate purpose served. OSA members could, the court noted, reject applications for membership for any reason including dislike or distrust. Of course, the court was willing to allow OSA to chart its own membership, but it had to be fair. Creating a system that allowed ample room for members to reject religious schools just because they did not like them was not enough. The court's point is clear. The First Amendment requires precision. When the state acts without precision, rights can be quickly abused. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined here today, and we have been talking
this
about
can that you've opened.
I know we have opened up a can, and it's been
open.
so rich, full of good discussion. But nevertheless, we've got Kerby Anderson as well as David Fraga that is joining me today. We're talking about the differentiating factors between men and women. So kind of a light topic, I guess you could say, for a Wednesday afternoon. But nevertheless,
not so light actually.
But yeah, we have
non-political.
Yeah, non-political. We're not going to talk about horse face.
Third time you say that.
I know, I feel like I have to say it. At least it's just very unprecedented. But nevertheless, we have been talking about what does it mean to be a man. I've just been very interested in knowing the differentiation between being a man and being a woman. And so I think one of the fascinating things is when you see some of these articles that are put out there, I think one of the interesting things is it seems as though they're highlighting characteristics that are prevalent and that we would have expectations for men and women to be able to live up to. And so we've been taking some of your phone calls, and you've been trying to differentiate, and many of you successfully, differentiate between being a man and being a woman. And so we're going to jump on over to Dee right now. Dee is out of Texas right now. Dee, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are
Hey,
you?
Dee, where in Texas are you?
I am in East Texas, deep East Texas.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very neat. Very neat. Well, Dee, tell us, share your point of view with us.
Well, basically, I believe that, and I've been doing a lot of research. I have a book that's about to come out in November, and it's called Logic and Lunacy, and it's how men can understand their lunatic women. And it is basically because men and women, God created men and women to be two halves to make a whole. Each one, like everything, even the angels have a hierarchy, and we have a hierarchy in the family. And I believe that the biggest problem in today's society is that people expect everyone to do everything for them, but they don't know their role. So men don't know what their expected role is, and it's just easier to give over to the selfish, spoiled, rotten women that are running their lives.
Okay, so tease it out for me for a little bit. What is the role of a man in the home, according to some of your research in your book?
Well, a man is going to be accountable for his entire family and his home.
Okay.
A man is a decision maker, and as one of your other earlier callers said, he is the one that is the protector. If you ask a man who he is, he's going to provide what he does for a living as his answer. Whereas if you ask a woman what she does, she's going to tell you how long she's been married and how many children she has first, before she tells you your career. So those things are divided. But a man is to be the final decision maker in the family. And the woman, as her role in submission. And submission, you're right, is a horrible thing that has been so distorted by women's lib that people don't understand. Men and women are created equal in the sight of God, but they do have different roles. Therefore, submission, basic, I love the definition that it means to raise someone up to your level of importance, to make them as important as you are. So if you make your husband or your wife as important as you are, and you value their God-given roles in the marriage, then you have a happy marriage and you have a family, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do and who they're supposed to be.
Okay, so tease out, what's the roles and responsibilities of a woman then?
Well, a woman is a nurturer. She is called to lift up her husband. You know, the statement, behind every great man stands a great woman. That's because a woman takes care of more of the details and helping him, helping the man. She was created, God said, to be a helpmate, to help the man be who he needs to be, and that is who she needs to be.
Interesting, Dee. Interesting. Well, we're going to have you back on when this book gets completed. We'd love to figure out a way to be able to get this book. I'd be very interested to hear that. What's the title of the book going to be called?
Well, it is called Logic and Lunacy, and basically what I do is I take, because men don't understand women, we're all crazy and they have no clue what to do with us.
Y'all are from Venus, right?
Yes. So basically I take 5 different personalities of a woman, and I compare them to vehicle parts, and I also give them vehicle maintenance so they can logically understand how a relationship works.
Dear God, if you open up the hood of my car, I wouldn't know. I don't even know if there's dipsticks in cars anymore. My goodness, it's
what
crazy.
Does your maintenance record show?
I don't keep those receipts either. That's a bad thing. That's probably a character issue. But nevertheless,
I would love to come on.
Well, Dee, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your comment. And so we're going to take one more phone call, and we've got Richard in Arizona right now. Richard, are you there?
I am here.
Hey,
Thank you.
Richard. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Oh, good, good. What's your point of view, Richard?
Well, point of view, you had touched on it, and that's dealing with education, and you find most women are the teachers in education and whatnot, but it goes well beyond that. I don't know if you guys remember back in the early 1980s, Jim Dobson and Gary Bauer came out with a book, War on Boys.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's all endemic in our public school system. The teachers have been indoctrinated into what's called cultural Marxism and androgyny, or that the sexes there is no difference between male and female. That's built into the curriculum and the value system that's being instilled in the kids.
What are some
you
of the
find that also in media, but it's particularly endemic in our school system.
What are some of the things that you're doing out in Arizona, Richard? Help us to understand. Are there some practical ways that, because this is the second or third call we've heard about the school system specifically kind of creating a little bit confusion from what we would consider traditional gender roles. Is there things that you're doing, organizations that you're working with to help out in this area?
Well, there has been an attempt with our public school system. I've been working with one of our school board members, and so far we have a magnet school that just started. And they brought in the Hillsdale College Barney Charter School Initiative.
Yeah.
So they've abandoned the federal government's our system's Common Core. And so they're bringing in Western civilization.
That's great.
Going back to the classics. And I just pray that our new school board members don't eradicate it. But that is one thing I'm doing. Teach the Truth Project, but I supplement it, and I add in the teachings from the Frankfurt School, which is the foundation for cultural Marxism. That is the most predominant religion in this nation now, and that's the biggest battle that we have is political correctness, or that's the nickname for it, but it's cultural Marxism.
Yeah, you've illuminated a really good point indirectly, Richard, and I think it's very important, especially based on some of the conversations we've been having today about the idea of knowing that your vote counts. And again, I know there's some individuals that would say your vote really doesn't count when it comes to the national level, and I think we can make arguments for that. But what you're doing is you're getting involved at the school board level, and that is an opportunity. That's such a pivotal position, an essential position in every community, because regardless of when the votes come in from a national perspective, your vote significantly counts at the school board level, and your presence at some of those school board meetings and the malleability of these school board members to be able to be changed because of pressure from these people that, like yourself, they're going to see in the grocery store, they're going to see at the gas station. There's just a great opportunity to participate in a civic way to be able to vote in some of these school board elections as well. And so, Richard, thank you so much for your phone call. We greatly appreciate it. We're ending the show today. And so, Kerby, thank you so much, as always, for the opportunity, for the chance to be here with you.
Yes, David Limbaugh on with us tomorrow.
Okay.
Nick Hall on tomorrow. So we got a really good packed show of great material.
That's phenomenal. And David, man, great to have you on.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Awesome to be here.
It's so great. And listeners, thank you so much for joining us. So be sure to check out the website, pointofview.net, or Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Greatly appreciate your like, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
From Graceworks Pictures comes Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather.
It is with great honor that I have served my country, but I only stand before you today because Jesus is my rock, and because I have a family who loves and believes in me.
One marriage, one family, under God. Indivisible, rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at indivisiblemovie.com.
A major problem with socialism is that it allows people to benefit from the hard work of others. It permits the idle and indifferent to live off the efforts of their neighbors. For a society to prosper, everyone who is able has to contribute. And that's the only way Point of View Radio can bring you truth. We are profoundly thankful for you who have joined the Truth Team and make this program possible. If you're not on board, join today. Invest in our future together. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.